Hi, welcome to the Bag Maker Society YouTube channel. In today's video, I'm going to be making the Ethel Tote by Swoon patterns, and I'm going to be showing you how I made this version here. If it's your first time joining me here on the channel, my name's Deb and I make videos on all things bag making, and I hope that you enjoy following along with me with this bag. I made mine in wool with a cotton accent for the slip pocket. If you want to add another slip pocket on the back, then you certainly can do that. Mine is more of a slouchy version because I've used fusible fleece inside of the bag. If you wanted it to be more structured, you could use something like Decaville or foam, but I do talk you through if you want to use foam instead in the tutorial how best to do that. I have added a couple of magnetic snaps as well in the bag just to help keep it secure. I think if I was making this again, I would just put one magnetic snap in the middle because the two magnetic snaps have kind of given it this little bit of a funky shape once they are closed. So I think if I was making it again, I would put just one magnetic snap in the front. But other than that, it was a really fun sew to make, quite straightforward, very beginner friendly, also very domestic machine friendly. If you wanting to make it on a domestic machine in materials such as cotton or a light denim, it would work absolutely fantastic. So without further ado, let's get into making the bag. So we can make a start and go through all of our pattern pieces. I have all of my pattern pieces here already pre-cut, interfaced, stabilized, and I will talk you through how I've done that. My strap, I am going to be doing just one handle. So I have cut mine out. This is 4 inches wide by, I think I've cut it out at 24 because I like a slightly longer strap. And then my accent piece is cut out slightly less at 3 3/4 inches. I have already folded these into the center. Don't know if you can see that. Because spoiler alert, I started filming this and then realized my mic wasn't working. So I have already folded these into the center and pressed them. So I'm just going to pop them to one side because we will move on to sewing the handle in a second. My exterior pieces, I have 2 main panels cut out. Like I said, I am using wool for the majority of my exterior, and I have mine stabilized with some fusible fleece. I'm not using foam because this wool is quite heavy already, and I just felt that the foam might be a little bit too structured, so I'm using fusible fleece. My machine, obviously I'm sewing on an industrial machine, so I can handle, or my machine can handle, the fleece being in the seams. If you are sewing on a domestic, by all means keep the fleece out of the seam allowance, so reduce your pattern piece by 1/2 inch all the way around the edge before you fuse it. I have my slip pocket pieces. I'm just doing one slip pocket, so I have 2 pieces for an exterior and interior. This is cotton and it's interfaced with a fusible woven interfacing. If you want to do a pocket on each side, you would cut out 4 in total, 2 exterior, 2 lining. I have my side panels, which again, I have stabilized with fusible fleece, and these are in the same wool. And my bottom piece, I have fused my Decaville heavy to this piece first of all, and then gone over the top with some fusible fleece. So my lining, I have 2 main panels, again, cotton fused with woven interfacing. I have my side panels in exactly the same fabric, and I have my bottom or base piece, again, done exactly the same. I have also cut out 2 pieces of cotton fused with woven fusible interfacing. These are for my zipper pocket for the inside of my lining, just on one side. These have been cut to 9 inches wide by 6 inches deep. And if you want to fuse these with a non-woven interfacing, that's fine for your lining pockets. I just fused mine with woven interfacing because that's what I was working with, and I had that to hand. So that is all of my lining pieces. And the hardware that I'm going to be using, I have a number 3 zip. This is around about 10 inches. I've cut it a little bit longer, probably only going to need around about 8, but just to be on the safe side, I have cut it a little bit longer. I have a handmade metal tag and a sew-in woven label. I have 4 purse feet, but if you don't want to use the purse feet, that's fine. You don't have to. And I've also got 3 magnetic snaps with the washers as well. I will be sewing on an industrial machine. I sew on a Jack H2 walking foot machine, and my thread is a Tex 45 that I got from Little Stitcher Sews, but I will have everything linked in the description box down below. So I'm going to work on my slip pocket first. I'm just going to mark my centres. I normally have this all done when I prep, but for today I haven't. So just marking the top and the bottom, marking the centres, because it does make it easier when you're putting the bag together to make sure that everything lines up properly. So I am going to line up one of my exterior pieces first of all, and I am going to mark down, I think, an inch. No, I might do 1.25 inches actually. Yeah, let's do 1.25 inches. And I am just going to make the placement for my snap. Just going to pop a couple of clips just to keep this in place, and I'm going to mark my snap placements through the lining piece of my slip pocket and the exterior of my main panel. And we can attach the female portion of the magnetic snap to the exterior. I'm just going to pop a little bit of glue on the back of my snap. I like to do this because I find that it does help keep everything in place. And just push it through those holes that you made. Just going to place a little bit of Decaville on the back as well, just for a little bit extra stability and security. And add a bit of duct tape. And this will protect the fabric on the other side, so the lining fabric, from these metal prongs. So you can just move that to one side for the time being. I am going to sew my 2 exteriors together first and then put my other snap piece in, just because I find it easier to stitch and top stitch without the magnetic snap being in place, and then it's not getting in the way of your stitch line or catching on your sewing machine. It does just make it a little bit easier. So I'm just lining up this top edge, and we're just going to sew this edge here at 1/4 inch. And I'm just going to trim this back slightly using my Pinkin shears. The reason that I'm using Pinkin shears is because it creates these little notches and means that because this seam is on a curve, it will sit a little bit better as well. So I've just trimmed it back by roughly about half. Just going to pop my iron on because I want to give this a press. And I'm just going to roll this seam out, make sure that it's all sitting nicely before I press it. Obviously, if you're doing this in vinyl, you wouldn't be able to press it. So just roll it and get that seam as flat as you possibly can before you top stitch it. So I'm just going to take this back to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch away from the edge all the way along. And then we can come back and insert our magnetic snap. So again, I'm doing the same thing. I'm just popping a little bit of glue on the back of this magnetic snap. Just place them through the holes that you made and popping a little bit of Decaville behind just to give it a bit more stability and structure, because we are just going through cotton here, and if you don't stabilize this magnetic snap, it would eventually just tear and come away from the cotton. So it is always best to use a little bit of stabilizer. Decaville Lights works perfectly. If you've got a little bit of foam, anything like that would work great. And then this just all gets lined up, and I'm going to go and baste this in place. And then I'm just going to pop my name tag on here as well. Now, where you want to put your name tag, it's completely up to you. If you want to put it on your pocket, by all means do that. Do that before you baste it in place, because you just want it to go through the exterior of your slip pocket, not both pieces. So you would just put it on the exterior piece. I'm going to pop mine up here. So I want mine in the middle. And I'm happy with it there. So I'm just going to mark my placement. And again, I'm just going to use a little bit of glue on the back. I'm not using loads, just a little bit, just to help keep it secure. And just make sure that I'm happy with the placement of it from the front before I put that tape on the back, just to protect those prongs. Okay, so I'm going to work on the base first of all. I have marked my placement for my purse feet, and I've done that by basically marking my centres. I have already sort of placed my centre markings, so I've drawn a line down the centre both ways, found my centre. I've then come out from this long centre line 1.25 inches, and I've come out from the short centre line 2 3/4 inches, and then where they have intersected is where I am going to be placing my purse feet. So I'm just going to mark the holes for these first. And then I think I'm also going to do some quilting on my base, because I like it, and I also think it helps to keep the Decaville really nice and secure when the bag's moving and being used. Nothing separates and it keeps it all nice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up this 45-degree mark on my ruler against the edge and line it up with my center and make a mark, and then I'm just going to use the width of the ruler as line placements. I'm going to take that to the sewing machine first of all and sew down each of these lines, and I'm just going to use a top stitch and length. And then I just do exactly the same thing but the opposite way. So line up that 45-degree angle and make my lines all the way across. And I'm just going to repeat and go and top stitch those exactly the same way that I did before. And then I can just get rid of these pen marks with my iron, as it was a heat erasable pen that I used. And then insert my purse feet. The first thing that I want to do is make sure that my screw is padded out enough and that my purse feet are going to sit nice and flush with the bottom of my bag. And I have a little bit of a gap, so what I'm going to do is use a little bit of extra stabilizer behind these screws. So I've just got some scraps of Decaville and I'm just going to fold them. I think folded in half, 2 layers will be enough. Push my screw through first and then into the base. I'm just making sure that fabric's pushed down around those screws, and then I add a little bit of glue just into where the screw is going to go into this purse foot, and this is just to help it really stick. It helps the purse feet to sort of not unscrew while it's in use. It just basically helps the longevity. So I'm going to take the side panels and put them together, right sides together with the base of the bag. And I'm going to go and sew that at 1/2 inch. So once your seam's all stitched in place, I am just going to butterfly this seam and I'm going to top stitch down each side. If you want to put both of your seams over to the base and just top stitch down the base, then that is fine too. And then I'm just going to repeat with the other panel, so lining up those centres and stitch in place at the 1/2 inch seam allowance. So that is the bottom attached to both of the side panels, and we can just attach them to our exterior pieces. So I'm going to go right sides together, move this one out of the way for the time being, and match those centres. Now I am making sure that I've got the base of my clips, which is the flat part, on the main panel. This will just make it easier when we're sewing. I'm then going to bring this edge up to meet the top and clip all the way down that straight edge. And then do the same thing on this side. So I'm not going to my corners just yet. And then I'm just going to make a couple of little snips into this corner, around about 2 to 3 mil in depth. They don't need to be very deep, and around about every centimetre. And that just means that that corner fits in nice and snugly. I'm just going to do the same thing on this side. And then I'm going to take this to the machine, and the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just actually going to baste this in place. I'm not going to sew my construction seam first. I'm going to baste it in place because it makes it easier to sew the final seam, I feel anyway. It means that you're not having to deal with clips especially while you're sewing in this bit on the round. So I'm going to go and baste it in around about between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch away from the edge, as long as it's within my seam allowances, and just using a baste and stitch length. So once that's in, you can just double check to make sure that you're happy with everything. And then I'm going to pop the other panel in. So just need to mark my centres. And then I'm going to go and take that to the machine and baste it in place, and then sew my final construction stitch. So that is the gusset and base all attached to the front and back panel. I am just going to trim this seam down using my pinking shears and trimming it down to around about half, making sure that I don't go through the stitches. If you want to run a second row of stitches around just behind the first row, just for a little bit of added strength and stability, then by all means you can do that. And then just the same on the other side. So I'm just going to turn the bag through and make sure that I'm happy with it before I move on. And just roll these seams out. And that's my exterior so far. I'm really happy with how this is coming together. So I just need to do the strap now for the exterior, and then the exterior is done. So my two strap pieces, this was cut to 4 inches wide by 24 inches long, and I have just drawn a line down the center and folded it into the center. I did use double-sided tape just because it's wool, it was bouncing quite a bit, and it didn't really want to stay in place. The accent piece has been cut slightly narrower at 3 3/4. Again, I have just marked my center line and folded that into the middle, and I've just pressed this with a bean cotton. What I'm going to do, because I want some extra top stitching on my strap, is I am going to take this to the machine and I am going to top stitch down each of these pieces separately 5/8 of an inch away from the edge using a top stitching length. And basically this will be just on the outside of the middle seam. So both of these are now top stitched, and you should be able to see just each of those lines down the middle. And then I'm just going to use some double-sided tape right down the center, and this will keep that accent piece in place for top stitching. So I'm just going to line this up, and there should just be a tiny little bit of the wool showing on each side. And then I'm just going to go and top stitch down each edge round about 1/4 of an inch away from the edge. So because this accent piece is slightly smaller, if I was to stitch it 1/8 of an inch away, I might not catch in the accent piece as well. So I'm going to stitch at 1/4 of an inch away, and then I should catch in that accent piece nicely as well. So that is our handle done. So I have the wool on one side, and you can see where I've got the top stitching down the middle that I did first, and then the top stitching down each edge, and then the accent piece on the other side. So I'm just going to pull this bag back through because I want it this way when I come to put my lining in as well shortly. And I'm just going to attach my handle in place. So I want the wool to be on the outside, I think. Yeah, so there's just a peep of the accent on the inside. So I'm lining up where the center of that strap is with the center of my side panel, and because I've made it 2 inches, it's just slightly less than what the side panel is, so it should fit really nice and neatly. And then I'm just making sure that my strap isn't twisted at all and it's all nice and straight, and then clipping it to the other side, and I'm just going to go and baste that in place. So that's the handle all basted in place, and we can move on to our lining. So I have my lining pieces here. I've got my bottom piece, my 2 side panel pieces, my zipper pocket pieces, and my 2 lining panels as well. So I'm going to start by putting my zipper pocket in. I'm just going to pop my iron on. And I'm going to mark my centres. And then just to make things a little bit easier for when we come to put the sew the bag together at the end, I am just going to turn up these bottom pieces. So I'm just going to mark up just 3/4 of an inch up from the bottom, and I'm just going to fold this edge up and press it just to create a 3/8 of an inch seam. So to make the box for our zipper opening, I'm just literally lining up the center of my ruler with the center of my pocket piece, and I'm marking down by 1 inch, and then I am going to come down by 3/4 of an inch and just mark a second line, and then I'm going to mark in by 1.5 inches, just to create that boxed opening. Obviously this isn't part of the pattern, I'm just kind of winging this, so hopefully it will work. So we want a lining piece. Again, I'm just going to mark my centers because this does make it a lot easier when we come to put the bag together. And with right sides together, I'm going to come down by sure I'm centered there. I think I'm going to come down by about two inches because I need to leave enough space for the magnetic snaps as well. So let's just line this up and make sure that I'm getting this nice and straight. Pop a couple of pins in to keep it in place. We'll pop one there and one here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and sew around this box here. Now when I'm sewing this, when I get about 1/2 inch away from the edge, I am going to drop down to my smallest stitch length, come to the corner, up this side, and then till I'm about 1/2 inch away from the edge again, and then I'll go back to my normal construction stitch and then drop down to the smallest stitch to do this end, and that just helps to keep these corners nice and neat. So I'm just going to cut through the opening till I'm about 1/2 inch away from the edge, just right down the middle. And then I'm just going to switch to my snips and put my glasses on so that I can see what I'm doing. And I'm snipping up to these corners, but I'm not going through the stitching. I'm getting as close as I possibly can. And then I'm just going to feed the lining through the opening. And just roll those seams out first and just make sure that they're all nice and neat. If you have any really big tucks, it just means that you haven't quite got up to that stitch length. So I think once this is pressed, it will be all good. I'm just going to press it from both sides, making sure that that's nice and flat. So I haven't got any tucks or creases or anything from this side here, which I'm really pleased about. And I'm happy with that. With that zipper box opening. So we just want to attach our zipper tape. So I am going to use some double-sided tape just on the back of the zipper pocket lining. I prefer to put my tape to my fabric as opposed to my zip. I'm just going to take off the top of that double-sided tape and line it up with my zip. So I want my zip to open to the left. So I'm just going to line it up so it's roughly in the middle. I find it easier to do it from this angle actually. And then once you have that side lined up, you can take off the tape on the other side. And press that down. Just gonna neaten this bit up. This is why I like to have it a little bit longer, because it means I can trim it down on each side and I'm not having to be really precise about where I'm getting that zip. So I'm just going to sew around the edge here and top stitch to secure this in place. And I'm just going to pull these stitches to these threads to the back. And tie them off. And it just means that I don't have any back stitching around that zipper. It's nice and neat. I'm just going to trim back this side of my zip tape just to get rid of the excess. I'm just going to singe those edges just so that zipper tape doesn't fray or anything during use. And then pop the other lining to this pocket. So I'm going to line up my centres and pop a pin in. Come to each corner and just secure that with a pin. And then our bottom edges, I just make sure that those are lined up. And we are going to stitch around this pocket, not the bottom. We are leaving the bottom open, and we are making sure that we don't catch in any of our main lining piece. We are just catching the zipper pockets and closing them up. So I've just made some placement marks for my magnetic snaps. I've basically lined the edge of my ruler up, coming down an inch from this lowest point here, so that this line here is nice and straight. And I've marked out 3 inches from the centre on each side, made a placement, and then marked my placement for my washer snaps. I've then lined up both pieces of linings together and marked these openings through both pieces. So in theory, my magnetic snaps should match up perfectly once this lining is put together. So I'm just going to install my snaps now. I'm just going to use a little bit of glue on the back as normal. And I'm installing the female parts on what will be my back of my bag, because it has the zip on it. I have some pieces of Decaville here to reinforce. And I'm just going to place the washers on the back to secure. And as normal, pop some not double-sided tape, some duct tape on the back to just protect those prongs. And then I'm just going to go and do exactly the same thing on this side. So that's my main panels sorted for the time being. I am just going to attach my side panels to the bottom of my lining. So again, like I did with the exterior, I just need to mark all of my centre pieces. And just matching these together, I'm going to go and take this to the machine and stitch this in place at 1/2 inch. And then the same with this side. Maybe should have cut the bottom the opposite way. Never mind, it's fine. And like I say, this is going to be stitched at 1/2 inch too. And then I'm just going to take the seams towards the base, so pushing both of the seams towards the base, and just going to top stitch down to keep them nice and flat and secure. So I'm just going to go and do that on both sides. And then we just need to attach our linings in exactly the same way as what we did our exteriors. So I'm just going to clip these together along the straight edge, match those top lines, sorry, not top centers. And then do the same on this side. And then just snip into the gusset to ease it in. I'm probably going to use some pins here because it'll be a little bit easier. and I am going to leave this part of my bag unstitched, and I'm going to take this to the machine and sew this down. So I want to make sure my stitching stays at the 1/2 inch for the first couple of inches, and then I'm going to increase my seam allowance to probably 5/8 to 3/4 to reduce this lining and so that it sits nicely. I am just going to pop my little tag in here. But what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to baste it close to the edge, obviously not this bit at the bottom, and then baste this side bit as well. That will just help keep it in place and will make doing the final construction stitch a lot easier. And then just repeat the process on this side here. And I'm going to go and baste this in place with a long basting stitch. And then I'm just going to sew my second row of stitching all the way around, completing this bottom as well, because we're not leaving a space to turn the bag. And I'm going to do exactly the same. I'm going to come down by about 2 to 3 inches, keep my seam allowance the same as 1/2 inch, and then increasing my seam to around about that 5/8, 3/4 to reduce the size of the lining so that it fits inside the bag nicely. Okay, so I'm just going to cut back the seams to around about 1/2 and just double check that I'm happy with them before I do that. I am fully expecting to have a few sort of nips and tucks in places because, like I say, we do have all of this sort of excess fabric. I've got a little tiny one there, but it's not too bad. I do have a masterclass inside the Bag Maker Society Club showing you how to reduce your pattern pieces for your lining if it hasn't been done in the pattern, and that is my preferred way of doing things. If I make a bag quite a few times, I will adjust my lining pieces to basically reduce it so that I can then still stitch it at the same seam allowance and you don't get as many tucks and little sort of pleats. I'm just going to cut this down. This side I can cut all the way around because this is the side that does not have the gap left open. And then on this side, I am just going to cut back up to where that gap is left. So I'm leaving that full seam for the time being where that opening is. And then I can just turn this back through, because we are on to basically our final part of putting the bag together. So I've got my exterior here and my interior here. My handle is already basted in place, so if you haven't done yours yet, you need to do it now. And I'm going to just pop the interior, the lining, inside the bag, and I'm going to match these side seams up. And then match my centres up as well. And then I just need to take this to the machine and sew all around the top at 1/2 inch. And then I'm just going to run a second row of stitching just behind my first row. I've just stitched all the way around that top edge, and I'm just going to reduce this seam again by about half. And I'm just using my pink and shears because some of this is on the curve. And then I'm just going to turn this bag through. I'm just rolling all these seams out again, just where it's been turned through that other time. And then we can just make sure that our lining fits well. And we are happy with it. And I'm just going to roll these seams around just to get them nice and neat at the top here. So if you were sewing on a domestic machine that has a free arm, you would use the free arm, slip the bag over and top stitch round. Obviously I'm sewing on a flatbed, so I'm going to pull the bag through again so that I can top stitch from my exterior and have it flat. I don't need to worry about pulling it through completely, just so that this top edge is going to be nice and flat for me sewing on it. So that's my bag all top stitched. So I can bring this back through again. And then we just need to close up our lining and our zip pocket. So I'm going to go in through my zip pocket and bring the lining that is open through that pocket, and then I'm just going to match my centers just so that I know everything's nicely lined up. And I'm going to go back and sew this seam and closing it all. And then I'm just going to trim back. Make sure that's sitting all nice and neat inside. And then I'm going to close up my zipper pocket. So where those folds were pressed, I'm just going to match them up and sew this closed. I'm just pushing this zipper pocket all down and into place. So making sure that my lining is all nice and neat. And then ensuring that my magnetic snaps all meet as well. And that is my Ethel, all made in wool, all finished and ready to go. So that's the Ethel Tote by Swoon Patterns, all made. I hope you've enjoyed sewing along with me. If you've made this bag, please do leave me a comment in the comments box down below and let me know. If you're part of the Facebook group, please do share your makes inside the Facebook group as well. Again, I'll put links to the Facebook group down in the description box. If you prefer a more detailed sew along, I do have a more detailed one in the Bag Maker Society Club. If you want details on that, that will also be in the description box down below. And yeah, all that's left to be said is thank you very much for joining me. Please do give the video a like. Please do consider subscribing, and I will see you on the next video soon. Bye.